In the last video, I accidentally deleted this end of arm tooling. When you set up a new work cell, you do have this option to set your end of arm tooling later. In other words, you can go choose something after you set up your work cell. If I go to my robot controller and open the plus sign a second time, here is my robot. If I expand that, here's my tooling. You notice there are several places you can load different tools in here, and that's because the robots can actually switch their tools as part of a program. I'm just going to change tool number 1, double click on it. Right now there's nothing assigned to it. And then here where it says CAD file, I'm going to click the folder. Or actually, let's just click this second icon, which shows you a little nicer view of what's in your library. And notice end of arm tools is expanded. I'm going to come down here to grippers, and it's the 3-jaw gripper right here. So I can hit OK and apply. Let's continue building this work cell. First thing we're going to do is add a part. And this part will be something that the robot can pick up and move somewhere else. You can make parts appear and disappear, and we'll show you that later. So to add a part, I'll go ahead and close this. Right click on this parts in your browser here. Choose add part. Let's go to the CAD library. We're going to add, let's go into workpiece. There's a bunch of work pieces that have been created. Come down to the one that says work 05. And instead of double clicking on it, if you drag this and drop it right on top of your palette, it will assign it to the palette. In other words, RoboGuide knows the part is supposed to sit on top of the palette. And let's just go normal quality and click OK. It's showing me the properties for this workpiece. Notice here you can make workpieces bigger or smaller by scaling them. We don't need to do that, but I'll just show you. You can scale it in the X direction, Y, or Z, but let's set that back to 1. I'm going to hit OK because the workpiece is fine. But now if you go to your palette, and I'm just going to double click the palette here. Palette has a tab called parts on it, and if I click on that, you can see that this workpiece we dragged in, work 5, is on this palette properties panel, and it's check marked. That's because when we dragged and dropped it on top of the palette, RoboGuide knows it's associated with the palette in this work cell. So click on edit part offset and set all of your values to 0, and that's going to perfectly center the part on the palette. You can move parts around like this, but I don't want to do that. I just want to set everything to 0. Go ahead and close that by clicking OK. You can see that the workpiece is here listed under parts. Come up here to palette and grab the icon and drag another copy of the palette with the part on it and place it about right there. Let's set this palette into an exact location. I'm going to double click on mine to bring the properties back. Go to General. Remember, we've got parts, location data here. We don't want that. We want to move the palette itself. So I'm going to go to General and set your X value to 500 millimeters, your Y value 1300, your Z value leave at 135, and no rotation, so zeros. These values are moving from the center of your project, which is under the base of the robot. Click apply and OK. Now we're going to set up something called a target. When you set up a target to a place that the robot often moves to, it's very easy to tell the robot to move to that target when you're writing a program. click on this green sphere, this is called the Teach tool, and it's located right in the center of the tool where it picks things up. It's called the tool center point. When you click on that, down here in the status bar, it shows you the current position of the robot, X, Y, Z, and there's those rotation values again, W, P, and R. And notice there is a little rotation here where the center of the tool is. So different Cartesian coordinates for that than they were for what we've used on our pallets. And we're just going to double check some settings here. Right now it's set on world coordinate system. Change it to joint. This is just a different way of moving the robot, where you move one joint at a time. So I'm going to set joint 1 to 0, joint 2 to 0, joint 3 to 0, 4 to 0, joint 5, let's type -90, and joint 6 to 0. And by the way, this is a quick way to reset your robot back to its home position. Just select that green sphere, set it to joint, and everything is 0 except for joint 5, which we want at -90, and in other words that means it's pointing the tool straight down. After you enter those values, press your enter key and your robot will adjust. Notice if I set joint 5 to 0 and press the enter key, the tool points straight out, so it's better to get it oriented towards what it's going to be working on. So -90 is usually what we set that at for the robot's home position. Press enter and we have set our robot in its home position. Click the target button and a toolbar will appear here at the right side of your screen. Click the button that says at tool center point, TCP, and that will place a new target there. If you look over here in your browser, I'm going to close this up a little bit, but down here where it says targets, we now have a new target named target 1, and we'll use that target later. One thing you may have noticed is there's another part out here to the side. Every time you create a new part, it's put on this little platform, and you can think of it as a reminder of what parts that you have in your scene. If you double click on it, it's called the part rack. It is possible to turn it off if you don't want it showing in your Workcell, but we're going to leave it visible just as a reminder of what parts we've put into our scene. I'll hit OK to close this. Before we move on, let's add a couple more fixtures. So come up here to fixtures, right click on it, choose add fixture, go to your CAD library, open up miscellaneous, drag a basket into your scene about here, and use your triad to move it to the side of the robot, and make sure your robot can reach it. There is a handy little tool for this. If you come up here in your tools and select the little arrow here on this icon and choose U tool 0, it shows you this pink bubble. That is what your robot can reach. So make sure that you place the fixture within the reach of the robot. Let's put it about right here. I'm going to close the properties to basket, and I'm going to right click on fixtures and add another one. Let's go to CAD library. Let's add this small table here, table 21. Go ahead and drag it right to your floor and position it in this area. You don't have to be exact on this, just approximate. And let's make a second copy of that by dragging it. Mine's called table 21, and put another copy here behind the basket. I'm going to close that and save this Workcell. Let's continue. I'm going to close this targets window, turn off the work envelope by clicking the button, center my Workcell by clicking this icon, and then zoom in a little bit. Let's talk about how to move this robot around. It's called jogging the robot. One of the easiest ways is to use this green circle. It's called the Teach tool. When you select that, you can use the triad to move the robot. So your first challenge is to use the triad to move to this table back here. Position that tool center point right above the table like that. As soon as you have it touching the table, please take a screenshot of what you've done. So hold down Windows, Shift, and the S key. Then drag a box, and in my case I had to click this corner and then I can click it to open it up, but please hit save and save this as, actually put a number 1 in front of it. Number 1, jog with green teach tool, and hit save. I recommend you save to your blue desktop. And close that. Okay. Before we move on, one important thing about jogging the robot: if you try to move the robot somewhere where it cannot reach, your teach tool will turn red. When you do move the teach tool farther than what the robot can handle, it snaps back to its previous good position, and you can refresh it by coming down here to this corner and clicking this refresh button. You also have an undo button here. This is handy to use when you're jogging the robot also and want to backtrack a little bit. You've got a redo button there, and you've got a target button there. The target that we created previously is this yellow axis floating in space, and we'll use that in a minute. Okay, next, you can also tell the robot to move to a part, and that's really handy when you set up a simulation. To move the robot to a part, make sure that your teach tool is selected. If it's not, you just need to click the tool that is attached to your robot. The triad appears, and if you grab the center of the teach tool, the green sphere, for this jogging exercise, move your tool just above this part and zoom way in. This tool has some notches here. This is a specially designed gripper to pick up parts that have cylindrical openings. These little gripper arms will expand out to grab the part. So once you've zoomed in here, to put this in the right spot, grab the green teach tool circle or sphere and drag till you get a green circle at the bottom of the part like this. Now if it doesn't work, just hit that refresh button over here. This is a good view to do this at, but it should go in like that. Then you can move it down just a little bit. So there's just a little gap there above the part, and that'll be a good place for this gripper to pick up that part. So when you have dragged this to a part, as shown, Windows key, Shift and S, and take a screenshot. I'm going to click here on my notification, save that, click save, and save it as number 2. Jog robot to part, saving to my desktop. When you zoom back out, you'll notice, so anytime we want to go back to that target, you guessed it, all you have to do is grab the green sphere teach tool, and you may have to change your view to get this to work until you can see that target floating in the air by itself. When your cursor looks like that, you can grab the teach tool and drop it to the target. You may have to do it more than once. I had to do it 2 or 3 times before it would work. When you're done, take a screenshot of that. Name it number 3, jog to target. So you can set these targets anywhere in your Workcell and quickly jog to them. Just a reminder that anytime you want to reset the robot to its home position, come down here, make sure it's set on joint, make sure you've selected the teach tool, And we want zeros in all of the boxes except for joint 5. We want it -90, so the tool points down. And hit your enter key. It happens to be the same position that our target was set at, so there's no change here. Another way to jog the robot is using something called the move to commands. So right here next to your target, this tool right here is the move to quick bar. You can see a little tip comes up over here when you hover over a tool to help you remember what it is. But if I click that, I see this right here. So we have the green teach tool selected. If I click face and come over and touch the face of this table or this palette or this part, it will position the tool center point right there. If we hit edge, any edge of something that we highlight, whether it's a table, the robot will come down and approach it in a way that's possible for it, as long as it can reach it. Vertex means a point, so like a corner point of something. And center, let's see if it hits the center of this palette here. No, it's hitting the center of each individual board that I click on. So if I hit a flat surface that has no gaps in it, it'll pick the center of that.